up. So it looks awesome. I think I've felt like I've been there sometimes before presentations. So definitely let me introduce Candra. Candra is, she really is everything. I mean, when it comes to she's done such great work. She presented last year with our Data Plus Women panel, and it was just such a cool event. I've learned so much from the panel. But on top of it, she's a public ambassador. She's also a member of the Tableau Community Equity Task Force, which is a very new role. Also a principal consultant, as well as a founder of sorry, oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher this here. Lumodus is a boutique analytics and digital experimentation consulting firm. And on top of that, she's a Tableau evangelist at a major insurance company. So she's really, when it comes to it, kind of a jack of all trades too within the data world. And I really want to hear more about becoming an effective player coach for data-driven teams, because I think this is kind of a goal not just I have, but I think a lot of us in the audience have. So without any further ado, Candra, please.
Well, thank you for that great introduction. So like you mentioned, I'll be talking about tips to becoming an effective player coach of data-driven teams. Before we go into all the fun stuff, let me go ahead and I guess you've heard a little bit about some of my background, but just a self-introduction. I'm Candra McRae. I'm currently based out of Columbus, Georgia, and I'm originally from Seattle, so go Huskies and go Seahawks. I'm the CEO and principal consultant of Lumodus, which is an analytics and data visualization and optimization testing consulting firm. And previously, I was the executive director of analytics at Ramsey Solutions, and I am a Deloitte consulting alum. Like it was mentioned, I'm a Tableau public ambassador, a former featured author, and I've been using Tableau since about 2014. I love using data stories to drive impact and influence with the people I work with. So when I'm not making data magic happen, I spend most of my time chasing after a newly mobile 9-month-old and hanging out with my husband. All right, so you've mastered Tableau. You're a comfortable Jedi approaching Zen status. You can write DAX with your eyes closed. You can create machine learning models like a knives sliced through butter. You're the ultimate analyst. Maybe your heart's desire is to be an individual contributor and essentially a doer, which is awesome, right, in its own right. But maybe you have a little bit of an itch to dip your toe into leadership on your analytics team and have decided to kind of shoot your shot at transitioning from an individual contributor analyst into a bigger role leading people, especially data people. And if that sounds like you, this talk is for you. All right, so in today's session, we'll spend some time talking a bit about what a player coach is and giving you some helpful tips and tools that you can use right now to maximize the potential of this role in your organization. So what is a player coach? A player coach is a manager hybrid role that combines the traditional tasks of managing a team, such as setting priorities and developing others, with the responsibility of getting analytics deliverables done as a member of the team. So to kind of put this into sports context or football terms, this would be like if the offensive coordinator and the QB was the same person. So I tend to consider the player coach, on an analytics team as the bench for larger leadership roles on the analytics team, because they're primed and battle tested. So when a bigger opportunity kind of avails itself, leadership knows that they have somebody that's kind of been waiting in the wings, getting practice, leading smaller teams, and they're ready for the big stage. So let's kind of talk about the teams. So generally on teams, there are about 3 primary roles, right? So here's a visual of kind of how some of these, team roles spend their time. There's the player. They spend most of their time kind of getting stuff done. I call them the GSDs. They're largely task-oriented. Then there's the coach, who is determining what plays the teams need to run to have successful outcomes near term as well as in the future. They figure out the puzzle and determine how all the pieces fit together. This is typically someone in a senior leadership role or above. And then There's our magical unicorn, aka our player coach. They do it all, but in a very specific context. So they'll typically lead a relatively small team, around 2 to 4 people, focused on a particular area or department. They're determining team priorities, blocking and tackling things themselves, dealing with people challenges that pop up, and they develop the talent on their teams. So our theoretical player coach has about a 60-40 time split between leadership responsibilities and getting stuff done. That sounds pretty good, right? So let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice. Most of their working hours are spent doing their own work, and then whatever time is left over is used for some bare bones basic leadership tasks like one-on-ones or team meetings. So this work first, people second dynamic effectively renders the player coach's leadership ineffective. And it creates the fast lane for bitterness and burnout because there's not a lot of delegation that's happening. You don't have any time to actually develop talent or, coach your folks. And you're really just checking the box, really, from a leadership perspective. So, what causes this player role to emerge? So, because there's some obvious benefits to why you would want to have a player coach, that is effectively leading. So, why does it really not happen all the time? So, the player coach is really super easy to fall into because many working managers are incentivized to just get stuff done. That's how they're measured, that's how they're rewarded. So, it creates this myopic focus on resource deployment at the cost of resource development. Also, part of this is driven by who's actually selected to become player coaches. There's always this, and what I always like to say, the research supports this as well, is that the person that's best at leading isn't always the person that's best at that particular task, right? So your sharpest analyst does not necessarily mean they're going to be your sharpest leader, right? And so sometimes organizations confuse that those qualities, and you can kind of get into folks that care about getting stuff done and not necessarily about coaching folks. And then finally, in the organizations, we dismiss or undervalue the bottom line impact of fantastic leadership, and we don't call it out, we don't measure it, we really don't reward it, and coaching it in meaningful ways is kind of hit or miss. So honestly, this is a choice. It really doesn't have to be this way. There is a possibility that you can balance getting stuff done and coaching. So, it's not inevitable. So, the question is being an effective player coach just a pipe dream next to flying cars? Or is this something that you could actually do as well as balance, the need to constantly deliver stuff as quickly as possible? And so my view is you can absolutely have your cake and eat it too. It will take, kind of developing institutional and individual muscles, and also an intentional focus to balance the needs of getting stuff done and creating space for people to actually lead well. So the question is, how do we do that? So let's hop into the 7 tips that I believe can make this happen. So the first tip is you got to select the right person to be a player coach. Not everybody is actually, designed to lead people, right? So having the right people in the right seats is like foundational to actually becoming successful. And so some of this rests with the company to not confuse technical competence with leadership competence, and also to create, tracks of, growth paths for individual contributors, so they don't feel the need to lead people just to have higher salaries or career progressions. There should be options for them as well. But people leadership really should be folks that actually like people. That's one, and actually want to coach them into success. So in past kind of analytics roles, I actually created individual contributor tracks for team members that wanted opportunities to expand their impact in salaries and influence across the company. But they absolutely told me that they didn't want to deal with people, right? Because dealing with people comes with a whole bunch of stuff, right? You got, feelings, you have, just things that, not everybody actually wants to deal with, right? Or is, emotionally intelligent enough to deal with, right? And so you got to make sure you have options for that, right? So and then the other piece of this is if you're a person, you have to be self-aware. If you don't like people and you're not interested in, seeing them grow at the potential cost of maybe slowing down a little bit of some of the delivery pipeline to help with some of their coaching opportunities, then maybe it's not for you. Don't opt in, right? See if there's another option for you. So let's talk about, like we've talked about the right person and everything else, but I really haven't named those qualities, right? So the burning question is, what makes an effective player coach? The first one is someone that believes that the team is bigger than them. We is greater than me. It's not about whether you've put up 39 points in the fourth quarter by yourself. It's about whether the team wins the game or not, whether the team has the level of coordination, morale, and communication to drive wins. This is a person that has a servant's heart and knows that they're there to serve the team, not the other way around. The second quality is someone that enjoys investing time in developing others, digging in to uncover potential, raising confidence of other people. And they do it because they believe it's important, not because they're checking some, box on some leadership form somewhere. The third is this is a person that creates trust. Trust is often the difference between terrible, good, and great player coaches. The way our effective player coach does this is by communicating openly and with purpose. They lead with transparency, vulnerability, and they challenge openly. They are also the same person behind closed doors as they are in front of your face. This also is a person that is skilled enough to pick up the slack. Empathy is fantastic, but it doesn't help get the ox out of the ditch when it finds itself stuck. So having the skills to actually dig in and pick up the slack when the team is needing an extra set of hands is absolutely critical. You got to be adept at prioritization. Knowing how to prioritize and hold the line is table stakes for effective player coaches. Being able to discern between the urgent and important, and knowing things that the team should stop doing is like oil in the engine. It creates this orientation towards value, and it reduces the number of fire drills and creates breathing room in the delivery pipeline, as well as it creates the breathing room in creating space to actually lead well. And then finally, but not least importantly, is you got to be a relatable advocate, right? At the end of the day, your team members should know that they have a warrior in you, advocating on their behalf, in front of them, as well as, when they're not in the room. You got to be relatable, right? That means you can't be some jerk that's like a robot, robotic or anything else like that. You got to be fun loving. You got to be somebody that people actually want to hang out with a little bit, because you are spending about 8 hours of time with them. And the other piece is, follow the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated. And so that's kind of one of those things where these are some of the key qualities. This isn't an exhaustive list, but generally speaking, this is what I've seen as the difference of those that are really successful player coaches and those that kind of, kind of bottom falls out of their team. So they have retention issues, they have morale issues, all the things, right? So tip number 2 is you got to demonstrate that team development is valued, right? And this is really more from an organization perspective, but also it's up to individuals that work at a company to support this, right? So you got to treat learning and development as a part of the core practice of the team, not just as an afterthought, right? So if you don't invest in your team's education, training, skills, and all this other stuff, they will only be as good as the day that they arrived on your team, right? And especially if you're talking about years and years and years, and especially in analytics terms, you don't want a whole bunch of folks that have, 2014 skills and it's 2020, actually almost 2021. So how do you make, development a part of that culture? So on analytics teams that I've led in the past, development was always at the center of everything that we did. So I subscribe to if you're not growing and learning, you're turning into an anchor and you're going to actually stagnate our team. and yourself actually. So the first thing I did was I developed learning tracks, because I know that the needs of our data scientists aren't the needs of our traditional data analysts, aren't the needs of our traditional BI report developers. So there was a learning track for each of them with 3 different levels to cover our entry level all the way up to our senior levels respectively. Then I created an analytics self-assessment for team members to identify their skill deficiencies that we would work on together to craft a quarterly learning plan that we actually looked at on a weekly basis, right? So to make sure that we were actually closing some of those skill gaps. Then I also required each team member to set aside at least 90 minutes, a 90-minute block like that. It shouldn't happen, outside of working hours. I want to pour into you, and part of pouring into you is also creating space and time during the day, to say I value learning as much as I value delivery, right? And then the other piece is, we would showcase different team members, presenting analytics concepts so that, some of the stuff that we would learn through some of the on the clock, learning time, or, some of our collective book studies that we used to do, so that, folks can see like, they can showcase this talent, who's doing what, and they can also create awareness of like how we kind of apply some of that stuff in our real world. So learning was kind of one of those things that was essential, right? And, and a great player coach has the heart of a teacher. All right. So I just want to kind of give an example. Yeah, I probably should have done this in Tableau, but I just kind of did a screenshot of my old assessment piece. But essentially it was, the team member rated themselves, I rated them, and then there was a profile based off of which track that they actually selected, right? And so a lot of you guys are probably like, well, that's super, super objective, or no, subjective. I'm sorry. Like, somebody's 3 could be another person's 2. So we try to remedy that as much as possible by kind of having a pretty detailed rubric. We're not going to obviously go through any of this right now, but, really kind of identifying, what is a 1, what is a 3, right? And so if you find yourself saying, no to most of the things in the 3 or the 5 area, then you're probably a 1, right? And so we kind of wanted to make sure that people were exercising intellectual honesty when filling this stuff out. So it really wasn't this, it wasn't punitive if you're a 1, right? And you're supposed to be a 3. That's just a fact. And so it's my job as a leader to say, how can we coach you up to be a 3, right? Versus saying, oh my gosh, you're just terrible and you're not worthy to be on the team, because that's not going to help anybody, right? And so as opposed to kind of having so many weird ways of closing gaps, we actually, prescribed things that we knew that if let's say you weren't great at math and stats, well, take some of these self-guided courses and you can help close some of those gaps to move from a 1 to a 3. Or if you're a 3 and needing to move up to a 5, here's some of the, learning, assets that we would use to close this gap, right? So that was kind of one of those things where I spent a lot of time developing a lot of this stuff, because at the end of the day, like your team, you will only deliver as great of a product as your team is, right? And your team is going to be a function of how much you pour into them, and so you really got to create time to actually go through some of these exercises, right? It just doesn't happen through osmosis. So the tip number 3 is be intentional with time. Speaking of time, right? So don't treat someone's like, oh, a lot of people hear this in like kind of dating context, but never, don't treat someone like a priority if they treat you like an option, right? And you got to treat, you got to act like the same kind of goes with your team members. If you're a leader on a team, your priority are your team members, right? And then if you treat them like an option, like you cancel on them all the time, and like they basically, it's hit or miss if you actually talk to them during the week, they're, like that's, you're not going to get the most from that relationship. You're not going to get the most from their level of productivity as well as their growth. So the big thing here is don't be too busy to lead. So a leadership fun fact is the busier you are, the less time you have to actually lead. And leading can be recruiting new team members, coaching your existing ones, guiding the culture on your team, and charting your strategy, your vision, all that kind of stuff, right? But if you're always blocking and tackling and just living in the moment, it's going to be hard for you to kind of scale that mountain from of here to there, right? And so here's a quick, like, kind of directional breakout of how to allot your time. And I call this, kind of directional, because there's going to be some seasons that you're going to have to, like, GSD up to 60%, and then there's going to be some seasons that it's going to be 30 or 25, right? So this is directional, but generally speaking, you should always kind of create space for prioritizing your backlog and flow efficiency and things of that nature. So a couple ways that I did this that worked for me, and and I can only kind of speak to that experience, is I leveraged time blocking on my calendar. So I designated Monday afternoons as my one-on-one time with my direct reports, right? And they each got an hour. And then sometimes it was 30 minutes, but most times it was an hour. I also blocked out recurring 2-hour blocks every day that was dedicated to desk time. And so, like, a lot of times people are like, oh my God, that's quite a bit of time. It's actually not that much time, right? Because that desk time is, grooming the Jira board, make sure things are kind of moving, from the delivery pipeline is healthy, making sure that we're actively managing to our team strategy. Also, it's just creating some margin time. So if stuff happens, and stuff inevitably happens, that I have enough margin in my day to go assist my team members to, help them kind of move forward in the wherever they were stuck, right? And so that was actually really important. And the other piece is I didn't spend all my days in meetings and trying to catch up with everything else in my after hours, right? So that's kind of one of those critical components. The other piece is, and this is more of a conceptual one, is you just got to know the difference between glass and plastic priorities, right? You can't treat everything as if it's equally important, right? And so someone, kind of told me in the past is there's always about 15 to 20 different things that are competing for your time and attention at any given moment, right? It could be your kids, it could be, 15 different meetings, it could be 15 different projects, whatever. And some of these things are glass balls, right? So if they drop, they're going to shatter everywhere, and there's going to be potentially major damage, whether that damage is to the team, your company, your reputation, your career, whatever. And then there's some other balls that are plastic, right? So if you drop those, nothing breaks. It's not going to be the end of the world. The key here, though, is understanding and having the discernment to know the difference between the two, right? And knowing that you are going to be juggling. And so, some things you're going to allow to drop because it's not going to be the end of the world, as long as you maintain those that are made out of glass, right? And a lot of times your people on your teams, those are sometimes the glass balls, right? You can't afford to drop those because that can irreparably damage a lot of the teams, right? And cause confusion and burnout and stress and all the things, right? So you got to really have some discernment in that area. Tip number 4 is delegate and stretch. You're not going to be able, as a leader, as a player coach, you're not going to be able to run all the legs of the relay race all the time. You got to pass the baton, and you got to and passing that baton means that you can actually watch your team grow and win, right? Yes, of course, you can always try to, beat the clock, right? By working 60 to 80 hours, right? And you can have that stamina to, get up early, and stay late and outwork your demands that you face. But honestly, that's going to catch up with you, right? And so you got to empower others to do their best work. That doesn't necessarily require your involvement. And their best work is, going to be facilitating your shared priorities, right? And so someone said that honestly, that is your ability to delegate as a leader or a player coach is going to be either the ceiling, that's going to set your ceiling for where you go, right? If you hold on to a whole bunch of stuff, right, and you're not, getting to that next level, and coaching others to do better work and do work as well as you would, you're going to be stuck. doing that same stuff, stuck in that cycle. And so you really don't want to trap yourself on that quote unquote doing treadmill. You want to make sure that you can let enough stuff go so that you can focus on kind of the higher value stuff, right? That your company obviously has confidence that you can actually deliver. All right, so the first piece on doing that is you got to engage at the right level, right? You can't be in every little meeting and every status update and all that kind of stuff. You got to figure out like what is actually necessary for me to, to be a part of, right? So I have this, it's sometimes it's silly to a certain extent, but you gotta like, it's, yes, if, so I always like to say, yes, I'll attend if my presence is absolutely required, meaning nobody else in that room can deliver what I could deliver, right? It's so unique to me. If that's not true, I'm going to leverage folks on my team to, be my proxy in that meeting because I have confidence that they can deliver as well as I can, right? And so I don't need to be, and also the other piece is not everything needs to be reviewed by me. If it's going up to the CEO, fine. Yes, of course, I'm going to review it. But if it's just, a run of the mill report and everything else like that, have, trust and confidence, unless proven otherwise, that your folks will deliver accurate stuff. Don't be a micromanager because micromanagers don't have time to lead. Because they're constantly in the mix. I just kind of talk through the, practicing the yes, no, yes, ifs. Extending your presence through others, right? And so you can be a part of something without actually doing the work. A lot of people that kind of try, are making that transition from analysts where they're kind of they're measured and rewarded by the stuff that they do. Sometimes there's a disconnect with still the work of others is still a reflection of what they do, but not actually doing the work, right? And so because your team members are a proxy for you, like for you, honestly. And so that's kind of what I mean by extending your presence through others. And then the other piece is, especially for analysts that are trying to make the transition into kind of their first people leadership role, is you got to carefully communicate all the expectations, right? Because of course not everybody's going to deliver as great as you will, right? Or that hopefully they'll deliver better, honestly. But you got to be, clarity is king here. And so you can't assume that people know what you want or what you would do in some instance. They're not mind readers, right? So the clearer you are with expectations and kind of key watch outs on certain tasks and deliverables, the better your team's output will be. So you won't feel the need to have to engage at all of these different levels, right? If you set kind of that stuff up front, it kind of takes you out to a certain extent of the delivery cycle down the road. And then the other piece is put people in stretch assignments that requires coaching. So this is actually good for you as the player coach because you're actually going to have to coach people. Like if you just give people simple assignments like 2 + 2, yeah, they're going to be able to hit the, hopefully they're going to be able to hit the target every time, right? But and you get a pass for actually having to kind of work through when to a level 3 assignment with coaching and not actually giving them the answer, but coaching them through something, right? That's a learning exercise for them, but it's also a learning exercise for you to how do you kind of pour into someone that they can deliver great results and it's not you that's actually doing the work. All right. Tip number 5 is hold regular one-on-ones and team meetings. Like a lot of people are like, oh gosh, especially in 2020 kind of Zoom, WebEx culture or whatever. It's like, oh, another meeting, right? But look, these little administrative meetings are accelerators when they're done the right way, right? It's where you can kind of get those deep answers and frank insights about what's actually going on, right? Because a lot of times in group meetings or where I always like call it mixed company meetings, you get kind of sanitized answers. In your one-on-ones, you get you get the ground truth. And sometimes the ground truth is exactly what you need to go fix a problem, because, people are being completely honest with you. Also in these meetings, you can build relationships with your direct reports, and they can also build relationships with each other in those team meetings. Also, your regular one-on-ones, this is kind of ground zero for feedback. And feedback in this context, it goes, from you as well as to you, right? Asking, this is where you can go, is there anything I could be doing better as your leader to support you? Right? As a player coach, as an effective one, you should be asking that question regularly, right? Because you need to make sure that you got to check yourself, right? You got to make sure that you are as great as you think you are. And if you're not, your direct reports need to feel safe and enough to kind of give you honest answers so you can actually improve on that, right? No one's born a great leader, right? But the way that you become a great leader is by soliciting that feedback so that people can, so that you can close some of your own gaps. All right. And then also these are important because you can facilitate alignment with your priorities and also your team strategy. So a lot of times, I know that's a lot. So I'm going to just give you a walkthrough, just a couple of tips on effective one-on-ones, right? So the first one is have a shared agenda to ensure that you actually cover what you need to cover. So this kind of helps you take ownership of the meeting, but it also makes sure that these don't become wastes of time where you're just kind of looking at each other and kind of going, I hope you have something to say because I don't have anything to say. That you can kind of get to the point to make sure that you're hitting on the things that need to make, that need to be addressed so that, your team can deliver, or that you can kind of get ahead of if there's any sort of non-delivery kind of team people issue thing that you can kind of address, right? The second piece is time box the topics that you need to cover. We all have about 30 different things that we want to talk about at one time, but we only have, let's say, an hour. And so you want to honor all the, most of the other topics, assuming that they're priorities. And so, I'll, lay out up front, hey, we're going to talk about this for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And anything that kind of goes above that, we need to make an intentional call. Do we want to not talk about the rest of the stuff that we mentioned? Because it might actually be more pressing and important. Or do you, we might need to put this in the parking lot and actually have a separate meeting entirely just focused on just this one topic, because maybe it's super involved and maybe requires more voices than just the ones that are on the team. And then the other one is begin with open-ended questions. Like a lot of times people are like, oh, did you complete that assignment? Yes or no? Those are not the kind of, you really want to have open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are questions like, how are you feeling? What's on your mind? Those are the kind of questions that kind of pull out the stuff that most people won't volunteer up front, but that can make or break either the morale of the team, the way, and the quality of someone's, kind of what they're producing. And also it can also get ahead of, even potential turnover, right? Because if someone's feeling some kind of way and they're not voicing that, then you're going to act surprised, in the future when they turn in their 2-week resignation notice, right? And so this kind of gives you some signals that you can either, spend some more time with this person trying to figure out what's going on, or you know what, everything's all good and we just need to keep on doing what we're doing, right? And it also gives you a morale pulse check, like I mentioned. And then here's the other pieces. If something comes up, please reschedule, don't cancel, right? I can't tell you, like the managers that I've had in the past that I was fond of, those are the folks that if, something happens, because things always happen, but they were really intentional about moving it to later on that day or the next day, right? It just didn't fall off the calendar, because I've seen where people have gone, a month and a half without talking to their direct leader because it just kept getting canceled because something else came up. Something's always going to come up, but you need to treat your people, effective player coaches, treat their people like priorities and not options, right? So let's talk about team meetings, because we just mentioned one-on-ones. So team meetings, I always like to say that the first 10 minutes of the team meetings, at least that I lead, I like to kind of walk through everybody's kind of high lows of the week. It kind of gets the, kind of honest conversations going. And it also provides the, not air cover, but the space that we can not just be, in happy talk land, but we can also talk about the stuff that didn't go so well. collectively, because also some people, like, they'll find that, they're not the only ones kind of going through it. And also we can, figure out if there's any collective action or solutions that we can make to kind of turn some of those lows into highs, or at least neutralize them, right? And plus, it's a human touch. Figuring out like how someone feels about, their work or how the week went. I mean, that's akin to like, how are you doing? If we don't stop and ask that, people will feel like they're cogs in a machine and not a part of a team that has a heart, right? And a lot of times the heart of the team is the leader, right? You'll want to review your team Tableau dashboards if you're a Tableau person, Power BI if you're a Power BI person, on key team metrics, right? Like, we can't be analytics and, and tell everybody to say, if you don't, measure it, then you don't manage it. Well, team leadership is the same way. You got to figure out what some of your key metrics are. Are they your throughput? Are they the number of stale tickets? Is it, like, turnaround times, right? Like, figure out what those, is it customer satisfaction scores? Figure out the metrics that matter most to you guys, and drive that, right? And what we also did was we had value metrics. Like, we had like where we said that analytics will be a profit center and not a cost center. And so we had, a running total or tally of how much value we've created across the organization. The other piece is we eliminated silos. So everybody we did popcorn style, as everybody goes around and talks about what they're working on. And then we had project showcases, right? And so, where an analyst would kind of walk through what they created, the options that they were faced with, the trade-offs of some of the decisions. This kind of helps your beginner analyst to kind of get the analytical framework of approaching tasks, but it also helps kind of do some reinforcement patterns or reinforcing patterns with some of our advanced folks, so they just don't take that stuff for granted and that they're applying that lens through their work. And then finally, we created a safe space to actually challenge constructively and ask questions, right? And so if something didn't look right, or, maybe it's a wrong methodology, or there's a better methodology that can be used, we created space to actually engage those conversations, right? And then, just like one-on-ones, if something comes up, reschedule, don't cancel. They should, team meetings should be considered a priority. So make it happen. All right, so let's create tip number 6 is creating the culture of feedback. So baking feedback as an expectation into the fabric of your team, just like baking in learning and development and all the other stuff, will make your team, have more successful outcomes and less like kind of fragile analyst stakeholder interactions, because they're flexing that kind of giving and receiving feedback muscle regularly, right? So you're not going to have these like, delicate little snowflake analysts that have never heard, hey, that doesn't work, or, I don't know about this. And, like, they're used to it because they've, kind of developed that and built up those calluses, through some of the analytics team kind of feedback, platforms or, support that we provide. So some tips to actually kind of do that. So the first one is Radical Candor. There's actually a really good book. I forgot the author, but like the distinction here on Radical Candor, because a lot of people are like, oh, just be brutally honest. No, don't be brutally honest, right? Because like a lot of times people's brutal honesty is really just code for them being a jerk. That means what this is be kind, but also be clear, specific, and sincere, right? So you don't sugarcoat anything or anything else like that, but also have things, be kind. You're talking to humans, they have feelings, they have thoughts and everything else like that. And so but you need to be honest with them. So that's Radical Candor. You got to give feedback early and often, right? Don't wait 3 months down the road to kind of talk about something that didn't work well. I mean, it seems kind of a bit petty. You got to keep it simple. Don't have PhD level or, dissertations on all the things that they did wrong. Keep it like high level enough for them to kind of do something actionable with. Be specific. So don't say, don't talk in general terms where they're like, yeah, I'm not sure if they're happy with this or what I could have done differently. Be like, hey, like, when I was noticing on that third bullet point that, like the sign was, supposed to be up and it was actually down, that's, you can kind of put your teeth into that versus I wish things would have got a little bit better. How, don't be petty. I wanted to put don't be petty all over this place because like no one likes petty people, period. But especially no one likes a petty leader. Because then it's like they try to avoid them at most costs, and then you're focused on pennies versus dollars and bigger projects, and so you want to be on point for that. And then you want to solicit feedback, right? So like and soliciting feedback, so because there's always this expectation that it's this one-way conversation. Feedback goes both ways. Ask how you are doing, what you can do better, how you can serve your team better, right? Because ultimately that's going to make you more effective. If you walk around smelling your own roses and all that kind of stuff and thinking things are great and they're really not, your effectiveness will be a reflection of that, right? And so here's an example. I mean, it's kind of stupid, but I thought this was a funny little GIF. But we actually would have the Gauntlet. So once a month, we hosted an analytics Gauntlet. And so it was basically like high impact, highly visible projects. And so an analytics team member would basically put up their work, explain it, look up their model, whatever. And then really the rest of the analytics teams would kind of popcorn style, create feedback or, constructive criticism or something to kind of, in a rapid fire way, kind of in the spirit of the Socratic method to figure out, if the methodology was solid, if there was a better way, if it was the best way that it was being presented and, and so on and so forth, right? And so the purpose of this was really just to kick the tires and draw out the underlying, assumptions in the analysis, design decisions, methodological choices, and all that stuff to kind of help drive quality, thoroughness, and customer-centric improvement. So that's like one thing that we did. And, it seems kind of scary, but actually a lot of people enjoyed it. We would like bring food and stuff and, usually end with laughter, but a lot of great improvements. And then the last tip is you got to create an environment where people do their best work, right? This is like period. Great teams don't just happen. Great leaders make the conditions to make the magic happen. And so you got to prime that environment. And the way that you kind of prime that environment for great work is clarity is king. So lean towards over communicating versus holding things, super close to the vest, right? And so I always like to say, in the absence of clarity, people create their own narratives, and then also they don't know where their lane ends and where somebody else's begins. So there can be some drama behind that. The second piece is, and we've talked about this early on, is the team will move at the speed of trust. Trust is the secret sauce of great teams and effective leaders. High trust teams share knowledge, they collaborate, they play their position. This allows them to kind of move fast and in the right direction. A team without trust is draining. Like, who wants to be on a drama-filled, like untrusting team? Nobody, right? And it's challenging on so many different levels. They're not only not as productive, but like it's just emotionally draining, right? You need to address morale issues directly and quickly. Morale issues are just a fact of life when you lead people, right? But effective player coaches, leaders, whatever, they deal with it. They identify it. They don't, do the iron hammer and everything else. So you got to really be, smart about how you do this. But morale issues can affect how your team actually delivers, the retention of your team members, and also your own success, right? And so you got to be proactive in dealing with them, right? So a lot of people like to avoid emotional discussions and stick their head in the sand and ignore them, hoping that they're going to be able to, wish them away by just focusing on the work. That's not how life works. Outside of the office is not how it works inside a work either, right? It's really just an RSVP to drama at your party. So just acknowledge it, understand it. And if it's, something that needs to be acted upon, of course, have a solid plan to address it. That doesn't include an iron fist where people are actually afraid of bringing up things that are potentially morale issues. And then the other piece is sincere recognition, right? This is real. Like thank yous matter. And also sincere recognition can change everything. Don't forget, that you're dealing with humans, as a people leader, right? And people are stretching themselves, working hard. They're giving you grace as a leader when you make a mistake, and it's not if you make a mistake, it's when you make a mistake, right? They're creating value for the organization. Thank them. Effective player coaches recognize the work that their folks put in, and they recognize that, and with sincere recognition. And a lot of people are like, well, what's sincere recognition? That's like, be specific, right? What are you thanking them for? A lot of people are like, oh yeah, thank you for everything. What? Who responds to that? But if it's like, thank you for, those flowers that you sent me. Okay, now I'm attaching my behavior to something that you're actually, acknowledging. And then be quick. Don't sit there and wait 3 months to thank somebody, because the moment's kind of passed, right? And also, don't be fake. People can see right through fake lukewarm praise like a million miles away. So, only offer, recognition when you actually mean it. If you don't, then keep your words to yourself, honestly. And also open your eyes to recognize the work, so you have something to thank them for, right? And then the last piece is have some fun, right? Nobody wants to work in a stiff environment. Like, they want to work where it's fun, it's collaborative, it's trusting, all the things, right? And so where you can, kiki and haha, as a team, like create that environment, right? And so, loosen up as a leader. So anyways, I hope that y'all got something out of this. I know it was a lot, but I really do believe that if you select the right people to be leaders or player coaches, and you value and prioritize development, you're intentional with your time, you delegate and you stretch your folks, you hold effective one-on-ones and team meetings, you create the culture of feedback, and you create environments where people actually can thrive. It's, then it's really not a secret sauce, right? It's not a secret recipe. You'll likely be on the road to becoming that effective player coach that everybody always aspires to be. So with that, I will take questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Candra. Everyone out there, definitely applause. It was fantastic. I know I learned a lot from that, and really loved hearing that. Yeah, exactly. People are saying you're dropping gems, so that was excellent. There were a couple questions that came through. Andre, he says, good talk. Do you have any specific advice for leading without being a full-time manager? For example, for a senior tech leader or mentor, or an expert member of a multidisciplinary group. So I think he's kind of
Yeah.
more of like a lead.
Yeah, like kind of that person would be leading through influence and mostly. And so you can apply, you may not be having effective one-on-ones unless, really you kind of dependent, if that's the nature of the structure where it's like there's teams that dotted line reporting to you, informally versus, formally. But I mean, you can still, apply a lot of these same kind of principles to, to where you don't have a formal leadership, component. You still want to be communicating clearly and, developing trust among team members. And even if that's just you kind of facilitating, or even, stepping into a de facto leadership role, whether someone's deputized you or not, right? So it kind of, I think that's the piece, is really just figuring out where the opportunity is for you to kind of coach and mentor others, right? And then applying these principles, because I think the principles apply even if you don't have a formal, people leadership role, and it's really informal. You can still kind of apply some of this stuff. You might not be having one-on-ones, but you might. I mean, it just depends on the role.
Excellent. Ooh, a couple more coming through too. What size team are we talking about? Would it make sense to have pulse surveys to address morale and trust if possible?
Yeah. So like what we used to do, so size teams, it really depends, but in the context of this presentation, I was looking at like kind of small-ish teams, like 2 to 4, 2 to 6 team members, because generally folks that are kind of transitioning from analyst to leader, they're not giving you like the entire, analytics team. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And so it's really like kind of 2 to 6, but it really just kind of depends. But the pulse surveys, what we used to do is weekly reports. And so it was like the same question, and they would fill it out at the end of every week. And so it was just kind of and then it was like, highs, what was the high of the week, the lows of the week, and is there anything that you want to talk about? Because like some people are better at writing stuff than actually like engaging verbally. And so that was a way for me to kind of get keep a pulse on some of that stuff. So if someone filled out that they were a 2 out of 10, then I knew like honestly in our next one-on-one, like talking about the work, we can have another meeting for that. Let's talk about why you're a 2. So that's so I'm a fan of kind of being intentional in surveying people with that too.
All right. Next question is any advice you'd give for teams with massively different skill levels or teams with mixed roles of like tech and non-tech?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, so as a effective leader, you kind of want to tailor your leadership style and the way that and some of the tools and that you deploy based off of who is on your team, right? But like I've had most of the teams that I've had in the past have been mixed in terms of their skill level. Like we had some, beginners that like just graduated from college and, just trying to figure out where the bathroom was, in the office to, someone that's been there longer than I had been, and so, that's where I think those learning plans, kind of came in to play, where we could tailor their learning and what they needed based off of where they were in their journey and also their professional aspirations. And so, with my more senior folks, I was really intentional about, okay, so, what are you going to do next? Right? How do we, do you want to be a leader? And if you don't want to be a leader, like, how can I best support you into where you want to go? Are you working on the type of projects that you want to be working on, right? The type of conversations that you have with people that are in different levels will will differ, right? When more like entry level, you really kind of just has the skills, it's a little bit different than a bit more seasoned team member. I hope I answered that question.
That's a good one. Yeah. And final question we've got here from Quentin is any tips or advice on how to break through the wall? So
what is the wall?
Trying to figure that out too. I was hoping you would. But I
mean, is it the wall of like, someone's not allowing you to ascend into a leadership role? Is it like the wall, like burnout wall? I guess I'm gonna say that I probably need a little bit more information to make sure I answer the question in the context that it was asked. But I do see a last question, if we're okay. What advice would you give for teams with mass? Oh, you already did it.
You
were on it. Okay. Yeah, I don't know about Quentin. Hit me up on Twitter and give me more context. And
okay. He's saying the cutoff leadership clique, the old boys network, so to speak.
Oh, the old boys network. I mean, the one is to recognize that the old boys network, you can be more powerful than them, right? It's an advantage that some folks have, but like if you ask for what you want, right? Because a lot of times people think, oh, getting to leadership, they're just going to think you're ready and then they're going to like deputize you a leader. No, sometimes you got to go, I want to lead a team. I want to do, and being confident with your aspirations and also prepared if they say yes. And also sometimes it's like that. I think it's that Teddy Roosevelt quote. It's like always, it's like, always say yes to, to that you can do everything. And then if they do, like spend all the time, like trying to figure out how to do it. Like, there's some of that, right? But, be prepared for a yes, but be confident and own the fact that you got to sometimes ask for what you want. There's always going to be some old boys network and all, there's always going to be headwinds. as you move from one stage in your career to another. But I think the key is it's how much ownership you take in your own journey, right? And how open you are about your aspirations and your
And it's
commitment to your own aspirations. Because if they say no there, you can say somebody somewhere will say yes, right?
definitely excellent point too. I don't know how frequently I've been surprised that people just respond back with a yes, where I've expected a lot of blowback, and I've been really pleasantly surprised sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, like the stuff that, people have said yes to for me, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, and then I spend my time getting ready and being ready and over preparing and all the things. But, you just gotta ask sometimes for what you want. That's half the battle.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. This was fantastic. I think we got through all our questions. There
Awesome.
is a lot in the chat, so if you can go back and take a look through, there's so many great points there people brought up, and just excellent conversation between all the really just the attendees too. They're awesome. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Hopefully we get to see you again.